Thank you for joining us today. Today I am joined with a special guest. His name is Jeff Pierce. He will be introducing himself. I'm excited that he is joining us for a discussion on Ethiopia today. Jeff, welcome, and please say hello to the audiences in Ethiopia.
Hello, audience. She's not excited. It's all a big lie. She's not excited at all. She's terrified of what I might do on here. And you guys should be too. Be afraid. Be afraid of what terrible things I might say. So, but no, seriously, thank you for having me.
Yes, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh my, excuse me. I don't know what is appropriate. I write books. I used to work in journalism. I used to work in radio and television years ago. I was a magazine editor. And then I happened upon the greatest story, real story that I think I ever found, which is why I ended up writing this, which is about Ethiopia's effort to fight back the fascist Italian invasion. It's an incredible story, full of heroes and villains and occurrences that you could not believe if it were in a novel, and yet they all happened.
Since the season is, I mean, it's Adwa time, we'll end our discussion with that. But I want to get back to your last article that you wrote.
Okay.
The title was very catching. Ethiopia versus the new white supremacy, and the picture that you have on the article is a picture of two people, one with Ethiopian sign on it and the other with the European analysts. And you see the European analyst with over 20 microphones. Basically, the European analysts' voices are, amplified, whereas the Ethiopian only has one mic. So, I mean, from the picture to the article, it really talks about how Ethiopian voices in regards to Ethiopian matters are, is not amplified. And we are looking for European analysts or American analysts, or we're looking for the outside world to kind of be the experts on Ethiopia. I myself believe that the world is a very small world now, much smaller than how it used to be, thanks to technology and connectivity. I believe that we are global citizens, that anything that happens in Ethiopia matters, here in the US and so forth. So my background is in public health too, so I understand and believe in global network and global and the whole globalization in general. But I do agree on some of the things that, on almost on everything that you wrote on that article.
Well, that's
really, I don't think there's anything
that's a relief.
I don't think there's even anything that I disagree about on that article. And I wanted you to kind of, I wanted audiences to hear about it. I want Ethiopians, especially in Ethiopia, to kind of get to know you and where that came from and why you wrote something like that and what are the reasons.
Oh my, well, that specific article was born out of complete frustration because, as you know, we're seeing, it's like we're living in parallel worlds. There is a huge disinformation campaign aimed at Ethiopia from the web. Pretty much the architecture is coming from the Western diaspora community in favor of the TPLF position. And the Western media, being lazy, and I know how lazy they are because I used to work for them, is not doing its homework, and they just accept like greedy chickens, whatever is fed to them, and they'll take it and run with it. And the social media sort of back and forth and jabbering goes on and on. It's not doing anything in terms of making any progress in terms of making the case. And this is not to say that I am, as I have to say again and again as a disclaimer, I am not an advocate for the Abiy government. I am not an advocate for a specific Ethiopian political party. How could I be? I don't live there. I'm not a citizen of the country. I don't speak Amharic. I will learn. I better learn. I was on a Zoom conference only yesterday, day before yesterday, and no, it was yesterday, and Professor Ephraim Isaac was speaking, and I couldn't understand him. And I would have loved to have heard his address because it was eloquent, it was passionate, and I couldn't get it. Of course, it'll help me with my research. So the thing is, I have no right to comment on the more internal politics of what goes on in terms of party versus party, elections, whatever, in terms of Ethiopia. But the outside world, Western media and how it's treating Ethiopia is very much within my purview, and I have a right to comment on it as I see fit. And this has been going on for a while. Nobody in terms of the Western media was hardly paying attention to the massacres that were happening in Ethiopia last summer. So then the Tigray situation comes along and we have this. But that particular article, I got very frustrated because I thought, okay, enough is enough. And it called for what some people on first impression think is an extreme position until you look at it closely. And you talked about globalization. Okay, so what did we see last year? We saw Black Lives Matter sweeping the world, and we saw the taking down of statues of Confederate figures and slave owners again. And that spread to the UK and it spread to other countries, so forth. I mean, the other thing too about globalization, before we forget, is let's remember, because the rest of the damn world doesn't know, Ethiopia had legations, diplomatic legations to Europe in the 1300s. They already were leading globalization centuries ago and were treated as modern equals. You know, somehow the world forgets how progressive Africa is. So we come to my concern in terms of what is it going to take to wake these people up to balance? And finally it hit me. All right, part of the problem is we've got Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, Crisis Group, and they keep screwing up, and then they correct their little errors and say, oh, we used the wrong photo, we're very sorry about that. Oh, we have to apologize because our last tweet was highly bigoted. Oh, sorry about that. And then you see CNN, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, oh, we used the wrong footage for our great expose in terms of the latest Tigray massacre. Gee, kind of a big thing. And so it hit me a little while ago to say, you guys need to go. You are part of the problem. And who the hell made you the moral arbiters of the world? Especially when Crisis Group is funded by foreign governments, funded by foreign foundations. They're not accountable to Africans. Human Rights Watch is not accountable to Africans. Amnesty is not accountable to Africans. They don't answer to you over there. They answer to who's giving them the money. And as somebody asked me today on Twitter and said, why do they keep messing with us? They put in a more pejorative way. And I said, because they just don't care. They treat you like a problem to solve for them to solve. And if you look past the liberal language, and I am an old-fashioned left of center lefty, so it took me a while to get to this leap. But after you get past the vocabulary, which is very woke and very liberal, you go, okay, what this comes down to is you still in the rich white North are lecturing Africans how to conduct their affairs. Screw you. Get the hell out. And sometimes it takes a bit of what on the surface sounds like an extreme position to see a truth. Just as last year, when people had to explain what defund the police means, we're going to have to explain, no, we're not saying, those of us who believe in this, we're not saying no to every form of oversight in terms of the international community of war crimes or crimes against humanity. Nobody wants that. What you're asking for is, you are not accountable to anyone. So where do you get off lecturing other countries on how they conduct their affairs? You want to solve the problems of the world? Why don't you go start with Putin in Russia? Because I don't see you like crying out for intervention there and rushing off to save the Crimea anytime soon. Oh, I see. It's only for Africa you seem to want to rush in and have your independent commissions. Funny how that works. So yes, I call it the new white supremacy because I think it's apt. I think it's very apt. This turned into a rant, but unfortunately, this is how I feel about it. So we'll move on to the next question because I think I went on for a bit about that.
No. Actually, I didn't want you to stop it because why I brought you here. It's because I wanted to get behind why you wrote this. And I think I feel like, when you say, why don't you go and go after other countries who have, obviously other issues. And
if I can interject, the thing is, they do and they don't. I mean, to be fair, they will do every so often a report on those, but it's a matter of scale. They're not, nobody said when the Crimea happened, oh, well, you should like rush in and intervene there. And even if they did, how long did that last? Whereas how long have we seen the prolonged, constant, relentless campaign which is very well orchestrated in terms of intervention towards Ethiopia. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, absolutely not. This is a discussion, so absolutely. Yeah, I think Ethiopians in general need to understand. I think it's also a matter of, how do you, I think the Ethiopian government has put out several statements in the last few days in regards to misinformation and also about, questioning internal activities and, to kind of remind the world that Ethiopia is a sovereign country and there are just boundaries for, how you want to ask certain questions or demand or suggest certain things, because obviously there are a lot of things that every country lacks. I mean, I've been kind of amazed. This is the first time actually I've obviously been aware of amnesty, but I did a little homework, trying to see about where do they get their funding, and I looked at all the campaigns that they have all over.
It's an eye opener, isn't it?
Huh?
It's an eye opener, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I looked at, which campaigns are doing well and are actually making a noise and which are not, and how are they prioritized and so forth. And I believe it was 93 or 97% of their funding is actually given by private donors, and they don't allocate it, for specific work. Mm-hmm. But like you said, it made me wonder, okay, if most of the money that they're receiving is not allocated, how do they prioritize certain things? And I see their Africa advocacy is pretty hot, and why is it hot? Why is it hot in Africa? And I'm not saying Africa doesn't have problems or, possibly have more problems in certain areas, but why is it hot in that region? Is there, after all, what is Amnesty? It's just another NGO, correct?
Yep.
Do we put the same microscope that we do with any NGO? And in fact, I feel like there are NGOs that are almost untouchable, that they're to be trusted all the time. But it seems like there are certain things that, and I'm not saying Amnesty doesn't do a good job and hasn't done a lot of things in the world. They are and they have, but I also see that there are some ethical issues, and that boils down to you. It could be your staff, it could be the environment, it could be the boss that's running it, or it could be people that are working there that are there for a mission themselves, or the donors, because you know, your donors obviously dictate the kind of work that you do, whether it's allocated for a certain project or not. Whoever is donating, like you said before, and I think someone had said that before too. I mean, if Ethiopia was the highest donor for Amnesty International, I doubt they'll be doing a coverage like this, because I saw some of the things that they have done, and you know, in regards to Black Lives Matter, and I feel whether it's Black Lives Matter or yeah, with Black Lives Matter, I don't think it's enough. You know, their voice was not amplified enough. Yes, they did certain things, but you know, how do we, as people, I think we've already been fighting the misinformation. I think Ethiopians are really becoming loud and defending their country. But you know, what are some of your suggestions on how to, you know, how to promote, you know, organizations that are big like that, to be accountable for the work they do, you know, because I feel like every organization is sort of running either for a click, to get attention, or to get money, funding, more funding, and this whole aid world sometimes can be, you know, a business. So
this is definitely
what
a
are
business. This is definitely a business. If you look at the funding, and I make no bones about the fact that, yes, part of my motivation when I first got on this was to an extent fueled by personal ire and outrage. I had and it's on public record, I had William Davison of Crisis Group come after me in a public, in a private exchange on Twitter and lecture me on how I quoted Jawar Mohammed, and under false pretenses, by the way. And my way of dealing with that is, oh, you want to do this? Okay, we're going to go public with your mess. And so I outed the entire conversation because what you did was highly unethical. And then I thought, all right, let's look at who you are and what you belong to. And the more I looked, at first I thought his Ethiopia insight, I thought that was attached in some way to Crisis Group. No, it's its own little package of this own little newspaper online. And it's highly unethical to be part of this so-called human rights group while trying to run what is purported to be an impartial journalism enterprise on the side. And you look in, I thought they were together somehow, and then I looked and went, no, this is a separate thing. And I thought, my God, how do you ethically justify that? And these people are in the business, this is why I call them the crisis merchants, because they are in the business of conflict. They don't want to see Ethiopia's troubles end. They don't want to see South Africa's troubles end. They want to keep it going. They like to keep the pot stirring. And I've come to the conclusion that this is what they do. They stir up the crap. And then I went deeper and I discovered that these people, when you challenge them, the analysts, have made a practice of, I don't want to go into the details of their targets to respect the confidences, but I know of several cases, besides myself, where they have bullied and harassed other people who have questioned their public stances in terms of current events in Africa. They go out of their way to harass and bully people to the point where complaints have been brought against their own human resources department. These people are busy, on the one hand, looking for transparency from the governments and the journalism, and then in private, you go around bullying the people who criticize you. That sounds, that's an interesting way to run a humanitarian rights organization, isn't it? So when we got to the point where
sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who owns the crisis group?
Good question. It's an NGO like others, but they get their funding from, you can look it up. I mean, you can look up the documents, and to be fair, they are transparent about saying where they're getting their funding from. But that doesn't mean they're accountable. If they get money from the World Bank, if they get money from, check me on this, but I believe it's either Ireland or Iceland, if they get their money from whole other countries and foundations, they're still not accountable to Africans. They're commenting on Africa, but they don't report back to Africa. They don't report back to the African Union. They're not held accountable to them. Who is holding these people accountable? So when you say, how do we get more responsible organizations in there? Part of my phrasing, but I say, burn the whole damn operation to the ground. Take them all down, get rid of them, and then let's examine how these things operate. Because right now, Human Rights Watch its headquarters is based in New York. They're not answerable to you. Well, you're here in North America, and so am I. But they're not answerable to Ethiopians. They're not answerable to South Africans. They're not answerable to Kenyans. They're not answerable to anybody. We got to take the whole system out and examine, okay, fine, you're getting your money that way, but where's your representation? For God's sake, we're doing this show where right now there's a protest that's got more attention over the fact that the Hollywood Foreign Journalists Association, or whatever it is, that decides the Golden Globes, it doesn't have one black member in it. And there's more play over that in the news right now tonight than there is over the fact that all these organizations are not accountable to anybody on a continent that they're talking about. Doesn't that seem out of whack to you? You know, doesn't that seem like a real priority issue that we should address?
What do you think? I mean, for instance, I mean, I think there needs to be a complaint, you know, an official complaint by Ethiopians and by the government about these organizations that are misinforming or highlighting Ethiopia in a negative way. What can citizens do? What should we, you know, do you complain? I mean, like, it's the same.
Do you mean here in North America as a diaspora community, or Ethiopians back in Ethiopia?
For diasporas, I mean, obviously we've been, you know, social people have been vocal on social media, and but not just that. Beyond social media, what can, you know, Ethiopian citizens, especially in Ethiopia and the diaspora, do to bring these, you know, complaints, issues? Because I mean, obviously, you know, organizations make mistakes. Yeah, some of them, you know, have been apologized. Like you said, CNN has apologized and so forth. But how do you? It's almost like, you know, certain organizations are considered as their own government. They're like a government themselves.
Yep.
And you know, I mean, that's how I feel. It's like they are a government themselves.
Yep.
And some of their staff, you know, completely misinformed, and the fact that they're the chief, or the fact that they're, you know, they work for that organization, and it's taken literally as, you know, as it is it affects Ethiopia. So how do we formally make a complaint about this? And it needs to be heard. And I mean, finding ways to actually be heard.
Well, you've got two different strands here. And the thing is, it's less comfortable for me to comment on what Ethiopians should do within their own country, because as I said before, I'm not a citizen. So I have some notions, but that's all they are. Let's couch this in the right thing. Years and years ago, I taught very briefly in Myanmar. And you had, at the time, this was a very closed off country. Sealed off and run by a military junta. And to a certain extent, young people culturally look to Westerners for that same kind of validation that you're talking about that comes from, you know, white Western people. And I would say, look, I could be full of crap. Don't take on faith whatever I say. Question it. Always question what I say, because I can be wrong. I can be full of it. And that is an empowering thing to say, hey, your teacher can be wrong. Question that. But for what it's worth, we have the two threats. It's easier in some ways to think about the practical, tangible action for the diaspora communities than it is for Ethiopia, but I'll get to that in a moment. For the diaspora communities, I've become so frustrated that I advocate this, and I advocate safety in all things. So the thing is, last year during the summer, we saw protests sometimes over between ethnic organizations and pro-Ethiopia unity organizations, which sometimes broke into violence. We don't want that. We never want that. Don't do that. What I advocate, though, however, is fair at this point, with socially distanced, wear a mask because we're in the middle of COVID, go park yourselves outside the offices of CNN, park yourselves outside the offices of MSNBC. You could try Fox News, but I think you'd be wasting your time. Park yourselves outside the offices of CBS, park yourselves outside the offices of the New York Times building. And the thing is, if you do that, that's an incredibly embarrassing move for these guys. They'll see you, it's like, maybe we should pay attention to the people who are right outside our building who are like paying attention. That's my tactical advice, because I'm not an activist, I'm a writer by profession. And so finally I'm saying, okay, we're gonna shame you bastards, pardon my French, into finally paying attention to the balance of the issue. Why is it that Deutsche Welle, if I'm pronouncing it properly, dw.com, can have an entire article on about Ethiopia with no Ethiopians in it, no Eritreans? Is an article that had, I apologize for mispronouncing his name, but that's the only thing I'll apologize for, Kjetil Tronvoll. It had William Davison, it had Michaela Ron. 3 white people who were experts in the article, and not one Ethiopian, not one Eritrean quoted in an article about Ethiopia and Eritrea. And they're still doing this crap. So we do that. We go after the playthings and toys, as I put in the article, of the TPLF and extremists, and say, we're taking away your toys. You've been conducting this little social media campaign where you score little points on barraging people. No, your biggest plaything is the media, and you suckered them really well, but we take that away from them. You start with that, and with a more balance, then you can reach those who are setting, say, US policy, those in the State Department to help change their opinions. You've got to go and say, okay, who is the EU listening to? Well, they're listening to France 24. They're listening to this media operation. So you park yourselves right outside the offices of The Guardian in London, and you do that. So they have to go, oh, we better pay attention. Now, in terms of Ethiopians back in Ethiopia, again, respectfully, I think the best thing you can do is learn. Part of the problem is you have a very young population. As I understand statistically, and somebody could check this, I think a good portion of the population is under 30. That's incredible. They've been through so much. They've had 27 years, the TPLF in power. Before the TPLF were the Derg, who, as you know, slaughtered, what is it, close to 500,000 people. These people screwed up and weaponized history. And you can blame a lot of that on white Western historians who came over and started to mess with it first. To the point where I've had young people, and I'm not kidding, I've had young people approach me on Twitter DMs and on Facebook and other places say, what should I read? I can't trust anything. Like, everything seems to have a partisan view. What can I trust? That's my own history. And they're asking the white guy, they're asking the Ferengi, you know, my God. And it's not because I'm so damn special, it's because where else can they turn? So I made a personal decision. I'm going to write a new history of Ethiopia, but it's going to take me a while. So in the meantime, listen to the history podcast of Tarek, if I'm pronouncing the name properly, Listen to those who are giving you the unvarnished history that isn't weaponized. Go seek out good books. Books that are, to be honest with you, many were probably written in the 50s or 60s, early 70s, before this crap started to happen, because by the 70s, you started to see these white Western historians start to choose sides. And there could be pro-Amhara, they could be pro-Oromo, they picked their camps. And then, of course, they did this and then blamed the Ethiopians for everything while they set the tone for, and they're still being quoted. You know, you can go on Twitter and you see little screenshots of people's pages. And one wonders if they read the entire damn book or the entire article. And that's not history. That's propaganda. That's polemics. And the other thing too, as I would urge, is for the Ethiopians in Ethiopia, is pull. I'm uncomfortable saying with this because I don't want to overreach. But it goes back to the message that I said in one of those early articles. You are one nation. You know, maybe there are some who tell you not to believe that, but you are. All of your peoples, all of your different ethnic groups built and developed the country together. They really did. I found the evidence for it. I'm going to write it. I'm going to prove it because it badly needs to be proved. All of you were brothers and sisters. So the enemy is not the Tigrayan. The enemy is not the Oromo. The enemy is not the Amhara. As I found it, and I will double check my homework, but Johannes IV, as I understand, is the person who is from Tigray, one of the greatest emperors of Ethiopian history, and he's the guy that decided Amharic will be the national language for the sake of convenience and so forth. Well, once you come to grips with that and go, oh, okay, a Tigrayan emperor said this. Once you come to grips with the fact that Menelik had an Oromo advisor as he made these and made negotiations and had certain groups submit to him in terms of coalescing forces. Once you come to terms with the interactions of the ethnicities, then you can get past all this crap and say, we are so mixed together, our histories, our destinies are so interlocked that this would be madness to tear each other apart. And I don't say that because of any vested interest. What the hell do I get out of it? You know, what can I possibly gain? I'm not getting paid for this interview. I haven't been paid for anything in terms of this. I'm doing this because there are people like us who love you.
An analyst.
Sorry?
I said if you were
yeah, if I was an analyst. But the thing is, you know, sorry for mid-rant, but I'll give you an example. I'm a Canadian and you're an American. Okay. My country had a situation with our province of Quebec, and we had a terrorist organization that pretended to speak for the Francophone people. And I'm not going to claim the similarities are parallel, but certainly the Quebecois in the 1930s and 40s were treated like second-class citizens. There were genuine grievances. Things had to change. But a terrorist organization went around bombing things and killing people. They took hostage a UK diplomat. They murdered a provincial minister, one of their own, Quebecois, to the point where Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, introduced what we have as the equivalent of martial law, the War Measures Act. And at one point, a very famous episode in our history, which I'm sure you're not familiar with, but every Canadian knows it, is because it's on film. A reporter walked up to him and complained about people being rounded up and arrested. Now, point of clarity, all of those people got financially compensated later by the government. We're like that, we're Canadian. We say, we're sorry, here's some money to compensate you for your trouble and inconvenience of going to jail, which was still not nice, but they did. But this reporter complained about these war measures in terms of armored cars on the streets and soldiers. And the guy said, well, look, how far will you go? And Pierre Trudeau said, just watch me. Just watch me. And people went, oh, he's not screwing around. He's not messing around. And the FLQ's response to all of this was to murder a politician. Now, up to that point, there were many Quebecois young people who liked to play revolutionary. But now things were serious. You know, they murdered a guy. And they seem to have forgotten that they also murdered people in terms of bombings and other things. But support drained away from these people. They're eventually found by the police. The UK diplomat was freed. The terrorists managed to escape to Cuba through a negotiation. They later came back. They were put in prison. They served time. We have never had this kind of problem again. We had 2 peaceful referendums to decide whether Quebec should stay in the country. I am not even advocating for that kind of system for Ethiopia. You decide your own ways to deal with your own politics. That's up to you. What I'm saying is look to, say, examples like ours and see what you want. And I guarantee you, if you fragment into little bits, your enemies are going to love this. You know, there is the Egyptian regime, not the Egyptian people, but the Egyptian regime in Cairo, which is rubbing its hands together going, oh, great, this is wonderful for GERD. You know, we'll fix this. There are other enemies who are just looking at this going, what can we do? You know, when the US can't even deal with the fact that their own whack job of a president incites people to attack the US Capitol, and then they want to turn around and lecture Ethiopia on how it deals with an insurrection where a military base gets attacked. Come back to us when you put Trump in prison. Come back to us when you solve that. Come back to us when you solve how